Thank you everyone for attending. I'm Tom. This is Katie. Katie leads up so many things at Certified, but customer success being one of them. So you've probably seen and heard her voice many times for those of you that are current customers, and we thank you for that. So I'm one of the co-founders. I'm also a large title agency owner. We're probably going to go into a lot of different topics based on the questions today, but I wanted to touch on what Certified does really quickly for those of you that may not be using the solution. So Certified safeguards wire transfers through identity verification and the secure exchange of wiring instructions. And Katie, you've seen over the last 2 years how companies have not only prevented fraud, but really taken kind of a leadership role around this topic. And I think that's just a neat opportunity that we're seeing unfolding. One of these unintended benefits of the solution has been how companies have used that in market positioning and branding.
Yeah. Educating their consumers.
Yeah, it's easy to use. We're integrated with many of the top title production platforms, but we also have a really cool web-based tool. So light and easy. You can get people on it in less than an hour. It seems like in training. So if you haven't considered us or looked into what we do and how we do it, we actually also insure each wire up to $1 million in and out. So some really cool stuff on that end. So we'd love to connect with you after this. Maybe spend 10 minutes, get to know a little bit more about you and your organization, and just see if we can help.
Yeah.
So, all right, with that, housekeeping. What are we doing?
So today we are doing an AMA, which means we get to ask you anything, which is always exciting.
Scary.
One of my favorite topics.
And I have not received the questions in advance.
He doesn't know what they are. For all of you out there, you are going to use the Q&A section or Q&A button on Zoom. I have them streaming into my iPad here, which is where I can see your questions coming in. Like I said, we do have a few to start off with, but we do want to hear more from you. So if you've got those questions, go ahead and bring them in. But we're going to start off with maybe an obvious question. I feel like this is the topic of the year, obviously, but 2020 has been unprecedented, unique, all of those things. Tell us how 2020 coronavirus COVID has looked different for you as, the title company owner, personally with Certified. What has 2020 been looking like for you?
I agree. So 2020, we just call it an unprecedented year on kind of every level. So let me put my title company owner hat on first, and then we'll talk about how that has bled into, unfortunately, more instances of fraud and use of Certified. So title company owner hat. When we went into shelter in place mid-March, I think one of the challenges that the industry had was each state kind of approached coronavirus differently.
Sure.
And many of the governors, either through executive order or through proclamation or whatever vehicle they had, put in states of emergency that really started to immediately affect real estate transactions.
Yep.
Michigan, I'll use as an example, one of the most restrictive in the country, just shut real estate down for about 6 weeks. You couldn't show a home. You couldn't list a home. It was like no contact. We're just not doing this right now, with very few exceptions. But in the same time, the rates dropped to historic lows. And we started to see that. And we actually I remember a LinkedIn post in January say, hey, this is interesting. Rates are ticking down. And then they just nosedived.
Right.
So it seems like overnight, looking back, the refinance pipeline just exploded. And the purchase pipeline essentially just, it dried up. No one wanted somebody in their house. We didn't know enough about the virus and things like that. At the same time, we're shifting our employee base to work from home. And as a title industry, we've done a lot of that remote, secure work environment just because of the talent pool and being able to find the best people wherever they are. But it's still a very localized business. People want to come in, they want to see the realtor, they might want to meet the buyer, talk about how to program the sprinkler and the nuance of the garage door and just that thing, right? That celebration of the closing. And we lost that. So I think one of the most unique things as a business owner where we are today in some of those the strains that we're seeing now that we've been in this so long. We had to rely on process, procedure, and technology overnight. So the idea of either call it RIN or you call it a hybrid RON, we all had to adapt to figure out, okay, I have deals in flight. I've got a pipeline in mid-March that could have started in January. Certainly all my February deals are still in process of closing, just given the natural cycle. And now I can't meet people. So we as an industry, and I applaud the industry, that we pivoted really quick to say, okay, there has to be a way. How do we get this done? So we created essentially a RIN solution that was compliant with our executive order.
Now, you're saying RIN. What is
Yeah,
RIN?
it's where basically you're not doing a full remote closing, mobile closing, because you're still papering out typically the promissory note,
right,
or you're papering out the mortgage. And that allowed for either a drive up or a remote signing where they were still wet signing in the presence on that of the notary in that remote session.
Sure.
And then they were next daying back that package for ultimately, final disbursement, recording, and final policy issuance.
Okay.
Where digitally, we weren't having people sign digital documents because we're not ready as an industry. All of the RON platforms got just completely smoked from a volume perspective, so they couldn't keep up with demand.
Right.
And then the lenders really, they just don't have the e-notes in the vault. So
sure.
So fast forward to today, what we're seeing now that I really, if you're not paying attention as a business owner or leader, it's important to, is we're still starting to see kind of the fatigue of COVID on the employee base. So what I mean by that is they've been working from home. That's not their ideal situation, or the kids are now at home. My kids are in home. My wife's an entrepreneur. That's a tremendous, the internet was down yesterday morning. That's just a cocktail for a really bad day, right?
Sure.
It's a really bad day. Andrew had to get involved, get the internet back up. But just be mindful that people might not be expressing it, but they're under this, people handle stress differently and prolonged states of stress. And this unknown and the change we're starting to see is affecting the home life more, because no one thought we would still be dealing with this.
Right.
Yeah.
So a new question that came in, little shift of topic here. Somebody's saying, how do I know if I'm prepared for a wire fraud incident? So, we're doing as much as we can to stop that from happening, but how do I know if I'm ready?
Yeah, I mean, unlike when we had our wire fraud as a title company in 2015, there was no guide to prepare. I think there are things that we can really do to prepare for, and I hope it never happens. But preparedness can kind of be self-curative in the sense that if you are prepared and you do the legwork, I think you'll be lowering the chance that you'll get hit with a wire fraud anyway, right? So putting on my certified hat now, there are things you can do. First, it starts with education. You have to educate your employees, you educate your referral partners, you educate your customers about the risk of phishing and business email compromise. Like, look, this thing's out there. We didn't create it. And we don't know if you would be approached or you could be a target, but you could be.
Right.
And here's what to watch out for.
Okay.
So you educate them. And I think part of that education includes, how is this going to work? Like, how am I going to get my wiring information to you so that you can remember that, okay, this looks like what they said it would look like, or this looks different.
Okay.
So you have to be able to draw some distinctions in that education that will remind the real estate agent or the consumer, the buyer, that, hey, that they told me I would never get them by email, or I would never get them through a phone call, or they're even express mailing them now, like an overnight.
The fraudsters
Oh yeah, no, they're willing to invest a little bit for a big payday.
Okay.
So educate and then set up kind of the rules of engagement for how to get money safely.
So you're educating on awareness of just that it's a problem, but then also on what the correct process should be.
Totally, so that they can see if something looks out. The whole idea is it's issue spotting, right? Like any lawyer, for lawyers on the phone, right? This is issue spotting. Like, hey, this looks different. This might be an issue that I need to then reach out, pick up the phone, call the title company, call the law firm and say, hey, I just got this. I just want to confirm, or you told me that specifically, it would never come in like this,
Right.
rather than just immediately acting. So that's the first thing. The second, internally, so that's kind of like money coming in. Disbursement wise is making sure you have really tight processes and procedures around incoming and outgoing funds. We just created the money transfer guide, right? That was downloaded, I don't know how many hundreds of times the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
If you guys haven't seen that, we can put a link into the email after the event today. But making sure that you have relevant, up-to-date process and procedures on when you're dispersing funds out. That includes making sure that the person that's receiving the money is who they say they are,
Sure.
right? And then I think, God forbid that something happens, are you prepared to rapidly respond to either an actual or the threat of a wire fraud taking place?
Right.
And that's where our guide on money recovery, is one of the most downloaded white papers in the country on that. But we have a step-by-step guide that's when minutes matter. So that's who's in charge. Do you know who to call at the bank? Do you have a relationship with federal authorities that can help you through the process? Do you know how to file a complaint with the Internet Crime Complaint Center of the FBI? Like, you got to run that drill, because I can just tell you firsthand that it's a terrifying experience when you learn that it's happening to you or might be happening to one of your customers.
Right.
And you don't have any muscle memory of what to do next.
So you, at your title company, then, do you guys run that fire drill essentially of?
Yeah, we're, I would say, so good at it now, but I mean, just because of our experience,
Sure.
We've had two. We had one in 15. We had one over Memorial Day where a buyer got tricked because the real estate agent was compromised. None of these were involving certified, so don't worry, customers. Knock on wood, the system has held all the different threats, but we're requested on a very regular basis to assist in funds recovery.
Yeah.
But yes, we have a whole protocol where the emails go, how we document it. The IT team makes sure that we're not compromised, our email servers at the title company side. And then I typically, or Lawrence, my partner on the title side, will run point on the let's get the money back.
Yeah. Yep. So that brings up an interesting question of helping in the fraud recoveries. So what does that look like? Maybe pick one that you've helped with recently and kind of walk through how we're helping recover these funds.
Yeah, I'll pick one, and if we have time, I'll do a second one. So, because I've got a really good story on an inbound and an outbound, and all these are very recent. So, I got a call. What's it? Wednesday? It would have been 3 weeks ago today.
Okay.
Right. 4:00. My phone and email starts to blow up, and I've got a title company owner, very large title company owner, asking us to assist in the recovery. Okay. What had happened was a buyer in Florida actually grew up in St. Louis. He had moved to Florida about 10 years ago to help mom. Mom had passed earlier this year in March, and he was moving back to where he grew up, right? Okay. So this was like final move, right? Life event. And he had a request by email come in about 11 o'clock that morning to wire just over $320,000 to an account for closing. Mm. So he went to the bank in person, released that wire, and then through a series of text messages with his agent in the title company, thankfully it was uncovered that, hold on a second, somebody got in the middle of this thing. We think the real estate agent's email is compromised, and not to stereotype or profile somebody, but that's a pretty typical scenario right now.
Sure.
Where someone else in the transaction's compromised and a buyer is duped or the title company's duped. So we stepped in, immediately worked with the buyer, filed the complaint with the feds, contacted our resources at the Secret Service, and was able to work through a full recovery, in this case within 48 hours, and he closed on time.
Wow.
But think about the framework. So I wanted a copy of the IC3 report so I could forward that on to the Secret Service. And he said, Tom, my printer's boxed up. Like, I had to find my computer.
Oh, so he's moving.
He's moving. Like this is all, and here's a gentleman, nice guy. I've got to know him fairly well over the last couple of weeks, but I mean, emotionally distraught over this. He doesn't know me, naturally. Right? We really don't have a huge relationship from a title perspective when we're representing a buyer, but he's being told that your life savings is completely at risk.
Right.
And he told me, he said, Tom, please do whatever you can because this is all that I have.
Yeah.
Like, this can't not work.
Yeah.
I already sold the house.
Yeah.
These were the proceeds from the house for me to buy my other house. I don't have any other money.
Right.
So those are kind of the table stakes that we find. One thing that has really shown this year over other years is how quickly fraudsters are moving money once they receive funds into accounts.
Got it. The muling.
The muling, right? The laundering. So unlike a check that might take a few days to clear the reserve, money transfers are immediate.
Mm-hmm.
So it lands, there's no seasoning, there's no check and balances. It can land and literally 2 seconds later can be transferred to another account.
Right.
And that was the concern we had there.
But in this case, was able to get the full recovery, full 320,000 back.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. He's happy.
Terrifying.
Yeah. Totally terrifying. And I look, I've been there. I've got that call.
Yeah.
I've had that emotion. And now I'm a little more clinical because I know how much time, and I told him, I said, I won't name his name, but we can talk about right or wrong and how all this thing went down.
Sure.
But right now, I just need you to do what I'm asking you to do.
Right.
Right. We're in action mode right now. We can talk philosophically or legally later.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, let's talk a little bit about insurance coverage. I think that kind of transfers nicely.
Do we have to?
Yeah, well, the people are asking about it, so I'm gonna go ahead and ask you about
insurance.
it. I know it's your favorite topic. So we'll start with just somebody saying, I have cyber and E&O coverage, but
Yeah.
is it enough? And am I covered for a wire fraud loss with those coverages?
So I don't want to dive too deep, so you need to keep me honest here on
Okay.
how deep this rabbit hole goes. At 40,000 feet, and we, again, putting my title agency owner hat on and certified, we buy a ton of insurance ourselves,
Sure.
is that two things have happened in the insurance markets. In COVID, wait till you see the renewals, guys. If you haven't been in a renewal this cycle, COVID is gonna amplify what I'm about to say. Okay, the liquidity in the insurance markets is shrinking. Okay, there just isn't as much cash in the insurance risk markets overseas. And because of that, they're increasing premium, especially in professional lines coverage.
Okay.
And they're typically decreasing the limits, especially as they relate to wire or what they call electronic payment transfer fraud.
Okay.
That's typically the endorsement, electronic payment transfer endorsement. So I subscribe because, I mean, look, we're title insurance, we sell insurance. I subscribe that insurance is a great way to allocate risk, right?
Okay.
So you buy whatever you can. Your E&O you have to have for your underwriters. You typically have to have for state licensure. You have to do really any work. And that covers the, what we do or what a title company does or a title agency does from, search to examination, commitment prep, closing statement, close it, disperse it, final policy, all that stuff, right? That's the work. The cyber side of it, email, data compromise, the integrity, wire fraud has all been shifted for the most part to cyber coverages.
Okay.
There are policies like we participate with, the FNF PAC, Stewart Insurance, and some others that provide wire protection on the E&O, but most of that has been shifted to cyber. I'll get to the answer to your question. Cyber, you have to be really specific with your carrier about what does it cover these days.
Okay.
And give them we give them examples. So what if, and then just plain English, what are you concerned about? And have them point within that policy language. Is it covered? What are the requirements for coverage? And what are the exclusions for coverage?
Right.
And a lot of people are getting caught in the exclusions for coverage right now because there's all these are what I call conditions precedent that you have to be able to prove you did to trigger the coverage. Oh, you have wire fraud protection. Do I? Callback, documented, third party verified. I mean, you've got this laundry list, and if I miss one of those, then they could deny the claim.
Right. I think that gets into kind of a secondary question here that somebody's asking, and they're talking about the social engineering piece of it. And so they're saying kind of like how good is in the insurance policy really, if I have to do all of these requirements like callback, third party verification. So can you go into a little bit about those requirements and how
Yeah.
you make sure that
The-
they're still covered?
This is a really good question, and I think this is something that you need to take a clinical review in your policies, all the policies, okay? And I'm glad you mentioned social engineering, because that's kind of that gray area. Look, if my server's hacked and I've got 1,000 records that were scraped, then I've got coverage for data theft and loss, right? If my server's hacked and ransomware shows up, I've got I mean, those are specific. Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
The challenge with social engineering is that most policies cover your employee that was socially engineered.
Okay.
But the challenge is your employee may be monitored through another email account, and the person socially engineered is the buyer.
Right. Or
And
realtor.
Or whoever.
Right.
And the title company wasn't involved in the social engineering.
Sure.
They're just unknowingly communicating with who they think is the realtor. And it could be either a spoofed realtor, somebody's
Right.
identity spoofed, or the fraudster a lot of times is just sitting in the real estate agent's account.
Right.
So the concern that I have most off is, and we're going to be releasing the white paper on litigation around this, is specifically designed to say, okay, let's just take the buyer. The buyer is tricked into wiring funds to a fraudulent account because the buyer thought they were communicating with the title company, and it wasn't the title company at all. But they look at it and say, well, who else would have my closing date and time? Who else would have the final numbers?
Sure, yeah.
Who else would know that? Who else would know this?
Right.
Right. And I think that's where it gets into what's called third-party loss.
Okay.
So if someone's tricked and I wasn't the one, or my employee wasn't the one that was tricked, how in the world could my insurance company underwrite the general public from falling prey to social engineering?
Right.
And the answer is, unless you can't.
Yeah, they don't. Yeah.
You really don't.
Yeah.
You might have a little bit of cost of defense, but you don't have full coverage.
Yeah.
And that's where we, the policies that we've created specifically hit to, those types of coverages.
So third party, that's an additional coverage that I can choose, is that third party.
On a very limited basis. That's
okay.
one of those where we've always said that wire fraud is interesting because it's one of those risk profiles that you don't get to choose the amount of the wire that they're focused on.
Right.
For example, if I have 10,000 records in my database and I know that database is exposed, it's roughly $200 per record, right? For notice, for the enrollment, for all the things you need to do state and federal wise. So I could pencil that out and say, okay, I get the risk. I'll try to secure it. Yeah. And then I can insure over it. But with wire fraud, I don't know if, let's say I'm the fraudster, am I focused on a $5,000 earnest money deposit or a $5 million commercial wire that goes to Goldman Sachs?
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
That's the challenge. And with third parties, you can't buy enough coverage right now.
Yeah. I think the biggest takeaway I like from that is just giving those specific scenarios and saying, am I covered based on my policy, or show me in my policy where I'm covered. I think that's it's
a simple framing of we're tricked.
Yeah.
And then provide all the examples.
Right.
They're tricked.
Right.
And it's they're tricked, but I'm sued. And that's what's happening in the courts. The buyer's tricked. The real estate agent was exposed. The title company was spoofed. And now I got a buyer naming me in a lawsuit,
right,
because they lost their life savings because I could or should have done more.
Right.
That's the concern I have for the industry right now is, what do we do with that?
Right.
Yep.
Speaking of lawsuits and cases, we had that webinar last month, and then I also have a question here. I think this person is referring to our webinar from last month. So they're asking if we have any sort of handout or summary on the law cases. So that white paper.
We do.
We do indeed.
So the white paper is finally finished. This was one of the, can I hand you that? This is one of the biggest projects that we've embarked on. We actually started it last year. And what I wanted to do for the industry, and we did as a team, right, is so many cases settle, but what do the pleadings look like? What do I have to, what do I or my insurance company have to defend against to get me out of a lawsuit?
Right.
So we went out several hundred cases analyzed, narrowed it down to real estate, and then really profiled, I think, 15 in the white paper. That it's not meant to say you're definitely going to be liable, or if you don't do this, then you're going to write a check, but more of
Right.
a look at how these things are pled and how they come in,
Right.
and then let's reverse engineer that.
Yes.
So everything from negligence to professional liability to breach of contract to
Right.
Consumer Protection Act, all how are plaintiffs lawyers claiming or alleging that I breached my duty? And they're so specific that you could say, okay, well, I'm just going to do that then.
Right.
And then that allegation could go away. And then I'm going to do that. And that allegation could go away. And it's the
Right.
same thing we were talking about earlier. You educate, you use
Right.
technology to verify identity. You're using secure, messaging and hygiene to transmit information that's private. When people read it, it's going to be like, oh, okay. But you got to do it.
Right.
If you don't do it, then
Right.
just one of those could lead you exposed. So the white paper is called Sued for Wire Fraud, and it's really meant to be this kind of complete guide for the industry on how we take these cases and we use them as a way to retool our own internal processes, so
Mhm.
that again, we can't control what the buyer's exposed to, but we can make sure that we meet this ever evolving standard of care.
Right. So even before you're sued for wire fraud,
That's the
you
whole
can
point.
take the lessons learned.
Act as if
Yeah.
this came into your organization and say, okay, could I respond to each one of these allegations? Again, it's not saying that the title companies named were at fault. You never get to that. They all settle.
Right.
98% of cases are going to settle.
Right.
And the frustrating thing, guys, is because you may have insurance, the insurance company is going to take over cost of defense. You may say, look, this is total garbage. I should be able to defend this. And they're gonna take it over, and we'll probably write a check, if nothing else, for cost of defense. They'll pencil in, yeah, we might be able to win this. We don't want to fight it, 50 grand, and rather than pay the lawyers, we're just going to pay the plaintiff. Happens all the time.
Got it. There you go.
Lawyers always win.
Yeah, that seems right. Okay, so regarding they're tricked scenario, so if the buyer gets tricked, does having an alert to the consumer regarding wire fraud and the need to call back and verify instructions, is that sufficient in the case of a lawsuit? Does that?
It starts. It's one of probably 5 components that I've seen. The negligence claim in the lawsuit is the broadest, right?
Okay.
I've got a duty to the buyer,
Right.
the duty to protect and make sure that that I'm this transfer of funds is done properly and safely. I want to make sure I didn't breach that duty. So the breach comes in of, okay, what did I do? But more importantly, what should I have done? What could I have done? And courts always balance like low cost, easy to do things with the potential impact that it could have had to the party that was injured.
Okay.
So secure email, for example, low cost, easy to do, could keep a fraudster out if they don't have access to that login on a secure email, right? So there's one example where, yeah, any private information you need to share securely. You got to make sure the data is locked down. You have to inform the consumer about the risks of wire fraud, what to watch out for. There has to be a mechanism where they know who to call safely if they have a question, rather than calling the number on the bottom of the fraudulent email. I mean, those are some of the big list items that people need to make sure they're doing. The other thing you'll see in the lawsuits is, if you're out there on social media and you're out there in your website and in the just in the market that you're in, touting that, look, safe and secure closings, fraud-free closings, this, that, you better be able to back it up.
Right.
Because they're going to cut and paste that language and add that to the complaint,
right,
to show examples of how you did not do that.
Got it. Yep. So it sounds like essentially that's a start to, I hear that a lot from some title companies of like, oh, I have my wire fraud disclaimer in my email footer, so I'm safe, right? It's a start and it's good, but it's not a silver bullet. It's not the end all.
No, you can't rely. And again, email footer is great, but if you've ever seen a spoofed email, they copy the fraud alert on the bottom of that to make it look more trusting. So This has to be intentional. This can't be buried in a 3-page introductory email at file opening. This is
Right.
like, hey, we're going to help you with the title work, but we need to have a conversation about this. And this is about your life savings and the safety of the transfer of your funds. And you have to be able to document what you did.
Right.
That's the other thing. This
Right.
isn't most of the time, some of the time, if they ask. No, each and every time, this is the protocol.
Right. So a couple more questions coming in from some of the participants here. So I think we'll keep going for a couple more minutes. I see one that says, do our customers need to get additional insurance coverage because of the real estate agents and other people that they're dealing with? Makes it more risky, essentially. Some of our customers wouldn't necessarily know to get that additional insurance, and if we are letting them know that we're using CertifID, they should feel safe.
So let me unpack that.
Yeah.
Up until now, and we haven't, other than those of you that are on the platform know that we were the first company in the US to actually offer an insurance product for consumers.
Right.
So it's not like I could go to if I'm a consumer, I can't go to my homeowner's policy. I can't go to my auto. I can't go to my bank and say, hey, the bank would be the logical choice. I need to transfer from my account to the title company's escrow account.
Right.
Can you ensure the transmission of that? And they would say, no. If anything, they're saying garbage in, garbage out, right?
Sure.
You asking me to send the money, I'm going to send the money. I'm going to close my eyes. I hope it lands. If not, don't call me.
Okay.
Right. So that if anything, the banks have kind of pivoted away from any type of liability. And we didn't think that was right. So let me just roll around what we're offering now. How is it that I could leave Home Depot over lunch? I could walk out of here, drive to Home Depot, right? Buy whatever, a lawnmower, and I could spend whatever amount to provide an additional warranty or protection on that asset,
in case something goes wrong.
But my life savings is completely exposed.
Right.
So we went to the insurance markets and said, what if a buyer could be empowered with their own choice?
Yeah.
What if they could directly insure the transfer of their funds if they chose to?
Right.
And what we're trying to do for the industry is a reframe here. We can't control the risk that the buyer has. We can influence, we can educate, we can meet our standard of care, but we want to make sure it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
The worst thing in the world is that there is an insurance claim for anything, your auto, your house, because of a fire. I mean, you just don't want it to happen, right?
Yeah.
So we've specifically designed that part, the money protection plan, to the buyer to just stimulate a deeper thought or conversation around the protection of their life savings. If they choose not to purchase it in our platform, that's okay, because the title company has one more kind of pulse or instance where, okay, I educated them, I used secure email, I used certified, they got the information, they agreed to follow it, and they declined to spend a few extra dollars that could have insured potentially the transfer or had recovery assistance. So I think it's another example where we're trying to round out what we're doing in the platform as to our certified to the title agencies. And part of that is, again, a further empowerment of the buyer, and especially includes recovery assistance.
Yep. No, I think that's important as far as just that they have the choice and they can get that additional insurance and can protect themselves.
Yeah, so. And if nothing else, look, you've educated them no different than trip insurance. If I want to fly, which no one's flying, but let's say we fly again. Yeah. If that becomes a thing, then I have a choice, and at least then the consumer is, like you say, they have a conscious decision to make, and if they don't make it, then the title company not only should not be penalized, but should benefit from that choice.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we've got just 2 more questions.
No, great questions.
Yeah, these are good coming in. So does Certified have a way to confirm the destination account? So for example, confirming the account info for a seller's payoff?
Half of it. So this is and I'll just speak as a title agency owner, I'll speak as an attorney and owner certified. The account matching is a point of frustration, right? Because at a high level, you would think, okay, I have a duty to safely receive funds and then safely disperse those to the intended parties. As part of that, you'd think I could have visibility, no different than looking up an address and confirming it to somebody that I'm sending a check to. Why can't I get visibility confidentially on where that money is actually going?
Right.
So we have the ability in our portal to match the ABA number with the name of the institution. Because
Right.
a lot of times a fraudster would list some community bank, but it's actually headed to a money center bank because the ABA number is rerouted.
Right.
Okay. But the account number is something that we're working on a solution, and we will be bringing that out next year.
Mm-hmm.
But even the solutions that are out there actually don't show the account
Right.
name. They give kind of a signal. Yeah, it seems good, or the account's what I love is the account's active. Well, they're not going to send you an inactive account. The
Right.
fraudster
Active
is
with the
not going to
fraudster.
let that wire bounce.
Yeah.
That's not the problem.
Yeah.
The problem is it going to Tim Smith? Is it going to Jane Doe?
Yeah.
Or is it going somewhere else?
Yeah.
And so far, for state and federal privacy laws and reasons, they have not been willing to disclose or share that level of information.
And so that's really the answer to why it's so difficult to confirm, is because of these state and federal privacy.
No, 100%. And even if we had account matching, so here's an example that I used recently in a media report. They said, okay, I'm paying off ABC Development, a Michigan corporation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I'm a fraudster, I could create ABC Development, an Ohio corporation, buy typically on the black web or the dark web the credentials of one of the owners, walk in, or have a money mule walk in, right, impersonate this person or do it through online credentialing, and all of a sudden I've got the name of ABC Development Co. in a completely different state.
Right.
When I do the account matching, I could have a positive match.
Gotcha.
So again,
not
when we
perfect.
talk about there's no like total silver bullet to any of this. I think the bigger challenge is, and that's been the bedrock of CertifID, is, can I trust the identity of someone on the other side?
Yeah.
So the way our system works is we'll match the ABA and the institution name. Once we confirm that person's identity, our insurance coverage will allow us to basically, take their word for it, because we know it's them, right?
Right.
You don't want the money to go into an account that's not yours.
Right.
So Katie, take a look real quick and make sure that I have these credentials correct.
Right. And so that, I mean, at least right now at this point, is the best option available.
Yeah, we're constantly looking for other solutions
Right.
and ways to make it better and more insightful. But for right now, and again, knock on wood, we've prevented so many frauds this way, where you've had sellers, think about it. I mean,
Yeah.
you've seen it. Yep, I got the right person, but they look at it and say, that's not my wiring
Right.
information. I don't know where you got that. Now, it could have been a mistake. A lot of times somebody transposed a number or didn't get all the digits correct, or it's just been fraud.
Yeah. And you keep saying knock on wood, but there's a whole lot of security and
No, I always
layers
say
behind our wood.
There's
that
so
we're
much.
knocking on.
There's so much going on. Yeah.
Yes.
Device analysis, knowledge-based
Yeah.
authentication. There's so much. And
Yeah.
we continue to add insights. You're fair in calling me out on that.
That's my favorite part of my job. All right.
I believe that.
I
believe
it's
that.
pretty fun.
Like everyone else on the team.
We are going to keep going. We still got quite a few people who are interested in what we're talking about today. And I think maybe our last few webinars have been longer, so they're just used to hanging out with us.
Hey,
so
we'll hang out as long as they want. I'm here.
if you want to keep answering some
let's keep
questions, I'm going
rolling.
to keep firing them. The next one says, do you find that some of the larger banks take longer to return fraudulent wires to the appropriate party? So this was a situation where the funds, it sounds like the funds are still being held by the incorrect receiving bank.
It's unbelievable. The money center banks, some of them are very good. We had a recovery that I'll name nameless, but one money center bank going to the same bank. So it left Grand Rapids, went to New Jersey. So think about it. It's an intra-bank transfer.
Yeah.
And it took the borrower more than a month. Had to sign the indemnity letter. It was clear fraud. When we helped in this recovery, other funds from another fraud were in the same account. So another title company had been defrauded over Memorial Day, and we went in to recover. We seized everything, And then it started to work its way back with the help of authorities. And it's absolutely maddening. So we say that in the white paper that the details may come back quickly, but the money will come back slow, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but the other challenge, so the money center banks, you're going to have to indemnify the bank, your borrower, or your whoever the account holder is that sent the money, you or maybe the buyer or customer, whoever it is. And what that means is, look, the bank's basically saying, I'm taking your word for it. I don't have a court order. I don't have any type of like federal seizure warrant or something like that, but I'm going to go ahead and start this money coming back to you. So you're going to sign an indemnity, or they will, that says if the bank gets sued or somehow caught in the middle of this, you guys figure it out, right? So that takes a little bit of time, but it is absolutely maddening. And I think the larger banks, what I call the money center banks, it can take up to a month, unfortunately.
So is it fair to say that the most important part is the freezing, and once it's frozen, then I have hope and like eventually it'll get back to me even if it takes time?
Yes,
Okay.
I would say it's a couple things there. 100%, you have to freeze the funds. You have to engage the FBI through the ic3.gov
Right.
portal. It's literally the letter I, the letter C, and the number 3.gov.
Okay.
And you can, that's where all the wire frauds are kind of reported. And then they will start to engage. Know that you'll never hear back from the FBI, ever. That's
Right.
their policy. So as much as you'd love for them to give you a pulse or what's going on, they have a policy that they do not contact victims after they receive a report. Okay. So file the report, call the bank. Your bank would call the receiving bank. And the important thing there is to identify, is all the money still at the initial receiving bank, or has money been moved? They're pulling out cashier's checks more frequently. They're paying off credit cards. They're doing prepaid. I mean, they're doing things to convert these assets rather quickly. A lot of times it'll go from bank A to bank B, and then the fraudster splinters it into several other banks. So those other banks need to be identified. So you get into this daisy chain really quick. So yes, freezing the funds is the number one, but also flagging it as a fraudulent transfer. What's interesting, and we got caught in this in our litigation, in our fraud in 15, the fraudsters will hire lawyers as part of the money laundering teams, so that when accounts are frozen, the lawyer calls general counsel for the bank and says, look, there's no due process. If you don't unfreeze these funds, I'm going to sue you, and it's going to be like all hell's going to break loose, basically,
Right.
if you don't unfreeze these funds. And we ran into an issue with one bank during our fraud where that happened, and then the bank went against the court order because they were threatened so strongly by the attorney.
Right.
And then check up, like, if you have a wire fraud and you're not engaging us to help in the recovery, just know that this is a time consuming process. It's
Right.
not a one phone call and done. It's almost like being your own patient advocate. You got to double check. Is it still frozen? Is it coming back? Is it still frozen?
Yeah.
Where's the rest of the money? Did we find it?
Be the squeaky wheel.
You have to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to be. So
Okay.
much of this is going on.
All right, we got about 10 minutes left. That is a real time check this time.
Awesome.
And 4 questions. So
wow.
Do that math, because we're gonna get through all of these 4 questions here. So the first one is, walk me through the process of how a buyer would use CertifID. So somebody maybe is interested just in understanding, what does that process look like for the buyer?
The buyer would simply receive, so the title company would use CertifID to securely send wiring information to the buyer, and then receive confirmation that the buyer not only received it, but agreed to follow those instructions.
Right.
I only say that because everything we've done is meant to set the title company up to meet the standard of care.
Right.
Because what we can't prevent, what we can defend against, is the buyer getting tricked at the last minute.
Right.
Okay. So best practice right now is, and we do the same thing, the minute you identify the buyer, you send them your wiring instructions.
Right.
I don't care if you're planning on sending a check, because what we've seen is, if the title company waits and the fraudster is the first one to introduce the idea or the concept of a wire, the buyer is defenseless a lot of times because they don't have anything to contrast it with. So It's typically through their mobile device, but it can be done through anything. They'll know it's coming because the title companies would have sent the email and some collateral about certified and wire fraud. So
Right.
I've got an informed buyer. We talk about information and education. I got an educated and engaged buyer. They get a text message and an email in roughly 45 seconds. They would go through, we would run a device analysis, they put in a code, they would be presented with the ability to insure their funds and receive recovery assistance to purchase money protection plan. Whether or not they do, they'll hit a screen that says, okay, I'm ready to receive these instructions and I agree to follow, and they will come up right on the screen of their device.
Right.
And then from there, they can save it into their wallet, they can download a secure PDF, and then that's what gets presented to either online or in-person banking.
Right.
Yep.
Yep. Really simple process.
It really has been. Yeah.
Good.
And it allows the title company, this is the interesting thing, not to take up too much time on this. The most successful use of certified has been where title companies start to create absolute rules.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't see it come through certified and the instructions don't show up automatically on the screen of your device, you can't trust them.
Right.
Don't trust anything that's attached to an email. Don't trust a secure link that opens up wiring instructions. Don't trust a phone call. Don't trust a FedEx. Like, it will show up right to the screen of your device.
Right.
And you've seen it. It has prevented title companies from writing checks. It has gotten title companies out of lawsuits.
Yeah.
Like, it's not to say it will work every time, but so far so good. It's working. Yep.
So next one is, do you have any information that I could email to all participants in a closing in order to educate or inform them on the various do's and don'ts around wire fraud?
Yeah, we do. This is a great question. And I appreciate the customer that, or potential customer that sent it in. We have a whole resources portal.
Yeah.
So again, rolling back to education, we've created standard email templates, co-branded flyers. So anything that the title agency or law firm or whoever is using certified would need, we have those standard templates. And it's not just, certified material. It's a proper education, a proper information exchange about the risk of wire fraud and what to watch out for.
And for our current customers in the resources portal, it's called the buyer fraud alert and the seller fraud alert, and they do specifically outline and say, here's what you should expect, right, from us using certified, how you'll receive it, and here's what we will never do.
Here's what we'll never do.
And
they're a little different because the seller isn't sending funds in, the buyer is. So the message is a little different. We even have a message to referral partners.
Right.
Hey, guess what? We're using certified. We're going to be asking your buyers and sellers to go through this process. It protects everyone, blah, blah, blah. And we're also seeing customers or title companies put this in the hands of the real estate agent and the lenders to get to this conversation started earlier in the process.
Yeah.
So what if the agent was so engaged and informed that at the form of the agency relationship, the formation, a buyer agency or the listing agreement, this conversation thread could start earlier before we see it in title and escrow.
Right.
That just helps all of us.
Yeah. Next one is interesting. I think this is a fun question. I want to see what your answer is here. So, do you think in the future you will be able to implement certified at all banks?
I think we will be able to implement certified in two ways. Yes, I mean, provided the willingness of the bank, but one, we could institute it at the treasury level.
Okay.
So as typically it's treasury, the treasury portal, which is backed by a treasury software at the bank, similar to our title production software, where given the request type or maybe the amount of money, something would trigger the need to say, hey, let's just verify this before we just release this out.
Yeah.
The other thing, we're actually working on this with a large institution, is what if I'm a member of a credit union and I want to buy a car, or I'm, transferring money for a deposit on a house.
Right.
Shouldn't I be empowered with the option to say, okay, yeah, before you do send my money, could I be presented with an option to use certified to verify that identity? So yeah, we do see, it's a great question. We do see a world where kind of behind the scenes at an enterprise level at treasury or the wire desk that could take place, but we also see like anybody walking in the front door or either in person or digitally, that this would be an option.
Okay.
Yeah, we're excited. We got
Yeah.
a lot of work to do.
There's big things happening.
There are.
Yeah. All right. Last one. What are you excited about for Certified and what's coming next?
Lots coming next. We have further integrations coming with the software providers. I'm excited about that. We're building out the team. So we just had this morning another great resource that's coming on. You'll see Certified rolling out into almost every major market over the next 6 months. Can't disclose how that's going to happen, but that is in the works. And I am excited. Sellers are going to start to be able to input their own bank information. We've got security that we're finishing on the back end to verify that information, so that the title company our customer could get that request out earlier. So if the seller hasn't raised their hand on a wire, we could ingest that programmatically, which will save time, and then we'll write back to that software the information that they gave us.
Yep.
And the insurance is a big piece. So just rounding out a whole direct insurance model where we're going to be revising our master agreement to include direct insurance, named insurance for each one of our customers. So right now it's in the form of a guarantee backed by our own insurance.
Right.
And we've created a special policy now where each and every customer are going to be named on a policy, as well as the consumers on that loan protection plan policy. So I'm excited about all these things. We could talk for another hour of what's in the hopper. That's more ideas than time.
Yes, that's a big deal though. That's exciting.
It is.
Awesome.
Well, this was fun.
Super
wow.
fun.
I thought it'd only go a half an hour.
Well, it's been good. Thank you for answering all of the rapid fire questions, and we'll send out the email that'll have some of the links to some of the documents that we talked about today, and hopefully catch everybody next month.
And thank you, Katie. A great host, keeping me on track. And thanks everyone for those of you that are putting your trust and faith in our team. Believe me, we're working around the clock literally to keep everyone safe. And for those of you that aren't, we're here if you're ready to have a conversation, learn about what we're doing and what we're excited about. So until then, stay safe, take care, and we will see you next month.
Awesome.
See ya.